Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Supercharge Costpoint BI Reporting with Integrated External Data, presented by Neosystems. I'm Don Carnevale, Marketing Director at Neosystems, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Joining me shortly will be our featured speaker for today, Tafiq Habibi, Senior Vice President of Professional Services at Neosystems. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can enter them into the Q&A area within Zoom. We will have some time at the end of the presentation to answer your questions. Also, we will make the webinar recording and presentation slides available to all registrants in the coming days. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll begin by discussing budgeting and reporting options outside of Deltek Costpoint. We'll then discuss the impact and benefits of integrating external data into your Costpoint reporting. A live demo will follow, which we will have some time for questions before we wrap up. As a reminder, for over 20 years, Neosystems has been the leading provider of back-office services for government contractors, including outsourced accounting, finance, payroll, HR, reporting and analytics, hosting, IT, and security, including CMMC compliance. Now to get us started, I'd like to hand off to Tafiq to begin our presentation. Tafiq?
All right, thank you, Don. I'm going to turn on my camera briefly. I've been having trouble with Zoom, so I might have to turn it off again. All right. So let me share again. I'm going to turn off my camera, but I just wanted to say hello to everybody and welcome. Hopefully you can still hear me. All right. And I'm going to reshare my screen. Okay. So today's it's going to be a live demo. So I know I'm pushing the envelope. I'm getting myself in trouble. But we're going to talk about some integration of external data that you might have access to and how you would integrate that in Cognos. And really the main question I want to answer for you today is if you budget outside of Costpoint, is there any way for me to compare budget versus actual data? So we have a very specific use case that we're going to focus on today. And I'm going to build this demo for you from scratch. So I'm going to start from scratch and go through the steps of the whole process in how you would integrate that data. And of course, the answer to this question is the fact that you can leverage Cognos' ability to upload files so you can accomplish this goal. I just want to make clear to everybody that this is not a budgeting and forecasting tool that we are looking at. This is more of an enhancement to enable reporting and deriving additional insights into your data in case you don't have a forecasting and budgeting tool and you still forecast and budget using Excel. So a couple of things we need to know to keep in mind when we talk about external data. You can use Microsoft Excel or CSV formatted data. The default size for an Excel file is the maximum is about 100 megabytes, but you can go larger via configuration change. Although a 100 megabyte Excel file could be quite sizable, I've never run into any issues with loading the data. Your data must be in columnar format, no crosstabs or pivot tables or anything fancy in formatting or anything like that. It needs to be simple, straightforward lists. You can have multiple sheets in your Excel file. Cognos, when you upload that data, will treat each individual worksheet as an individual table in Cognos itself. You can upload zip compressed files that contain multiple supported file formats, and Cognos will unzip them automatically, read the metadata, and upload the files. Typically, the default location is in My Content and not necessarily under Team Content where it's shareable. So keep that in mind depending on how you load the file. If you are building reports that take advantage of this uploaded data and you're going to have them shared reports, or you want people to be able to see the data, you would want to move those files outside of My Content and put them somewhere under team content where they can be shared. So when folks run their reports, they can actually see the data. A few other things to keep in mind as well, and this one is very important, is that you will need a logical relationship between your external data and your Costpoint data. The whole idea is that we want to be able to compare apples to apples. And if you do not have that logical relationship between the two sources of data, you typically run the risk of overstating amounts or understating amounts, or even duplicating values, or removing data that might be relevant for your analysis. So you just have to keep that in mind, and it kind of requires a basic understanding of the underlying data and what is required, so you can actually create some meaningful connectivity or relationship between the two data items. You will need to create a data module. For those of you that are not familiar with data modules, this is kind of a metadata layer that IBM Cognos makes available to you, which is very similar in functionality as Framework Manager. It just happens to be a web-based version, if you will, of Framework Manager. But this is where you can expose the different data tables and Excel files that you have to Cognos. You can create joins and you can derive additional tables based on that. So we'll see that here in a few minutes when we do the actual live demo. Okay, so just a couple of things to keep in mind. And with that, I'm going to show you first my Excel file. This is a basic simple list. I'm going to do some budget analysis or variance analysis for a few of my accounts in my chart of accounts. And you'll see here I have some metadata as well associated with how I do budgeting and forecasting. So I have my org ID or department and org name. I'm also tracking the account ID and the account name. And then I budget obviously by fiscal year and by period. And then I have some kind of budgeted amount in my Excel file as well. And I have data for each of my departments. You'll see here, this is my consulting, and then my IT services group, and then my manufacturing group. And I'm looking at a few of my accounts just to keep this demonstration timely and squeeze it in between the time we have. I'm just focusing on a few of the accounts. One of them is other direct costs. We have subcontractor labor, direct labor, and so on and so forth. So it's just a simple list of data that I am going to use to upload to Cognos. Now, you might do your budget cycle going across by month, for example. There are ways in Excel that you can reformat that data to make it acceptable for import into Costpoint. And ultimately, the layout of the file and how the data is presented is going to be determined by your logical relationship between the data and how you ultimately are going to report off of it. Okay, so with that, I'm going to close my Excel file and I will switch to my Cognos environment. And I'm just going to navigate to a particular folder here. So I'll go to my webinar folder. And the first thing I want to do is I want to import my file into Cognos. And I will go to the upload data link here on the top right-hand side. And Cognos will open up a dialog box. And so I'm going to go navigate to that folder. And here's my budget data file. And I'm going to upload the file. Cognos will analyze the data. Basically, it's trying to derive the metadata, what fields there are, and so on and so forth. And then you'll see here that my budget data Excel file upload was successful. And now the file appears in that folder. So by going to this folder, automatically Cognos uploaded the file here. Okay. The next thing I need to do is to build a data module that lets me integrate this data with my Costpoint data. So I'm going to come in here and click on New and select the option to create a data module. And Cognos, when you launch a data module, will ask you to select any data sources that you like. There is the ability to select data and actual individual tables in Costpoint. You can actually, if you have your data source enabled and exposed, you can select individual tables that you might be interested in. For those of you that are on premise or self-hosted, this is a lot easier to do than if you are, for example, in a SaaS model where maybe the data server is not available or exposed. But I do understand from folks that might be hosted in, for example, the Deltek cloud. I understand that they are working towards exposing that data server. But for our purposes, I'm just going to use one of the packages that we have available to us. Since I'm looking at financial data and I want to do a variance analysis of my actuals, I'm going to go look at my general ledger data. So Cognos lets you, if it is a DQM or a dynamic query mode package, which is one of the newer packages that have been recently released, you can use those and actually embed them into a data module. So I'm going to select the general ledger package and click OK. And now you'll see here that Cognos loaded up the whole package for me with all of its tables. They're all available to me and accessible. And I can actually look at individual tables from Costpoint. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to my data sources here, and I want to bring in another data source, which would be my Excel file. So I'll navigate to that folder. And let's see here, company content, webinar, and here's my budget data Excel file. And I will upload that as well. And you'll see here now my budget data file is loaded here, and you can actually take a look at the data. If you click on grid, you'll see that you have my org ID, my org name, account ID, account name, fiscal year, period, and my amounts. Okay. You can come in here also and clean up some of this data. You can rename some of these columns. You can change data formats and format the data as needed. You can do additional calculations and data derivations if you need. So you can do quite a bit of work from a metadata layer inside of your data module. One thing when I look at this data, I notice is that Cognos treated my period column right here as a numeric value to be summarized. And that's technically not true, or at least not the intended purpose of this field. So before I make any change, I'm going to come back here and take a look at the properties of that field. And instead of using it as a measure, I am going to switch that to an identifier, because in this instance, we're going to use this field as an identifier or an attribute rather than a measure that we can summarize. Okay. So now I have my budget data, I have my general ledger data, and I can actually go in there and do any join that I need, or I can use these tables as standalone. But since I'm doing a variance analysis today, I want to be able to join my budget data with my general ledger data to pull actuals, and then hopefully be able to derive additional calculations if I need, or at least do my comparative analysis in my reporting and my dashboarding. Okay. A couple of other things you can do when you load the package here, you are actually getting access to all the tables, but I can actually pull the specific data from the package by creating a custom table that then I can join to my budget data as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come in here and click on custom tables, create a custom table. And you'll see here, I get a list of all of the tables, and I'm only going to be interested in the general ledger posting summary. So I will go find that table and click on it to select it. And I am going to be creating a view of my table. And the only reason I'm doing that is I want to just create a specific table for my actual data with specific columns that I am interested in. So I'll click on next. And now Cognos says, what do you want to call this table? And these are all the fields available to you. Which ones would you like to use? So I will rename this table to actual data so that I can make a distinction between budget data and actual data. I technically don't need all of these fields that are coming from Costpoint. I only want a subset of them. So I'm going to check the whole list and only pick the fields that I'm interested in. So I'm doing a variance analysis based on accounts, right? I'm doing variance analysis based on my departments or organizations. I'm not doing any variance analysis on projects, but if I did, I would include that. Of course, I want to be able to compare apples to apples. So I will select fiscal year and period so that my data lines up. And then I'm only interested in the transaction amounts for that data. Okay. Once you have these columns, you can actually hit refresh here and get a sampling of the information that you're looking for. And it looks like I'm satisfying at least this particular requirement to pull data by account, by org, by fiscal year, by period, and then pull the transaction amount. Okay. Everything looks good. I'll click on finish. And now you'll see here, I have an actual data table. And if I go back to my tab, here's my actual table. And now I can effect the join that I'm interested in effecting between these two tables so I can create my report. I can do this one of two ways. I can select these two tables here and right click and build a relationship with them. Or I can even take it a step further and create another custom table and select my actual data and my budget data. And as you can see here, Cognos will let me create a joined view of these two tables, which would be very nice for my purposes. This way I can just line up the data and pull the budget amount and the actual amount. Okay. So I'll select a joined view and click on next. And this is the part where, if you remember in the slides, I talked about having the ability to have some kind of a logical relationship between your data sets. So in this instance, I'm going to map my account ID to my account ID. I want to map my org ID to my org ID. I want to map my fiscal year to my fiscal year and my period to my period so that all of my data lines up and I can, at the end of the day, compare apples to apples. So I'll click on match the selected items, and now you can see Cognos matched account ID to account ID, org ID to org ID, fiscal year and period. If you hit refresh, you can see now the data lines up, and you can see a sampling of the definition of that join. Okay. And if we're good to go, we can click on next. And we want to call this finally, give it a different name, variance analysis, for example. And we'll do a refresh just to see the data lined up. And as you can see, we have all of the fields from both tables here available to us if we want. Since I'm pulling actual data and I have all of my demographic data that I want, like the org name and the account name, fiscal year and period, it's superfluous to have the extras from the actual data. So I will uncheck these fields because they're going to be redundant. And I'll just keep amount and amount, which are the two pieces that I'm going to use to create my variance analysis. Okay. So now we're good to go. We gave it a name. We can click on finish. And now we have our variance analysis table, and it appears here as well. And as you can see up here, I have my variance analysis table, and I can actually organize this information further. So I can drag the amount right here to the bottom. This could get confusing for my end users. So I can come in here and do certain things like rename fields. Okay, so this is my budget amount. This is my actual amount. I can even actually make these a little bit more business friendly. And we'll just rename these as well. Might as well since we're here. Account. And lastly, org ID. And now everything looks good. And actually, it's probably a good time to save my data module. And we'll take that to company content. We'll put them all in the same place. Analysis data module. Click on save. And now we save our data module to the system. So at this point, my work is done. I can actually take my data module to a test drive, and there's an option within the data module here that lets you do that. So we can click on try it for data modeling, and Cognos will open up kind of a Report Studio Lite, if you will. And as you can see here, here's my budget data Excel file that I can use. Here's my actual data query. Here I have access to all the tables that are available in my DQM package. And as you can see, I have my variance analysis here as well. And actually, I can start looking at my organization. And we'll switch with page preview. And as you can see here, these are the only 3 organizations that I'm interested in today. So I got IT services, consulting, and manufacturing. I can pull the account ID and the account name. Everything looks good. We'll break out the data by period. And we can take a look at our budget amount and take a look at our actual amount. And this is where I would typically do some calculation and derivation of data, make sure that something is not being duplicated and such. So you can actually do some analysis in here, do some grouping and summaries and things like that. One thing I did notice, and I noticed right off the bat, is I'm seeing these values repeat, okay? And it's repeating for each of these rows, it's repeating multiple times for each of the accounts. So that looks like a little bit of a red flag for me, especially because they're actual amounts. And the expectation is that they don't necessarily, are not all necessarily the same account. So there's an issue here that I need to investigate. So we'll go back and take a look at what could be potentially the problem there. You can also have the option, if you don't want people to actually have individual queries for actual data, for example, and budget data, you want your end users just to focus on that variance analysis piece and report off of that. You can hide these as well in your data module, so that only your end users and your report authors are only able to see or can see what they are you intend for them to actually see. So let's go back and see if we can hide these 2 tables here so that they're not exposed. And unfortunately, I can't hide the whole package. So I can't get away with hiding that. I haven't figured out a way to hide it. So we probably have to leave that in there, but we can certainly hide these 2 custom tables that have the budget data and the actual data. And then we'll go see and fix this problem in here. All right, so I'll switch back to my data set. My data module. And it's very simple to hide these 2 tables. So if I want to hide actual data, I can just go to its properties and select hide from users. And I'll do the same thing for the budget data, hide from users, and that should gray them out. The only other thing I need to do is come take a look at my actual data. And if I go to the properties of that data, my sneaking suspicion is that I'm multiplying data because my GL posting summary has project ID in it. So there's data for project IDs, which is typical for the GL posting summary. However, for my budgeting exercise, I don't have project IDs. I don't budget at project ID level. So my data is summarized and it does not factor projects. So I have to accommodate that. Again, the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that you have to have underlying knowledge of your data, and you have to, at the end of the day, build that relationship between your different sources so that you are comparing apples to apples. So my actual data table will actually, I need to change its usage to a summary table, which means that it will summarize the data. If anybody has ever done any reporting in Cognos, this is kind of quasi enabling the auto group and summarize feature that you have in Report Studio. So I'm going to change the usage of that table so that I can, for lack of a better term, decrease its granularity, and so that it lines up with my budget data. So I'm going to save my budget analysis data module now, and then I'm going to just do a quick test and test drive it again. And as you can see now, my data module opened up again. My actual data query or table is gone. My budget data or source file is gone. And I just have my variance analysis now in my data module. Okay. So I'll do this again just to do a quick check and see if I fixed the problem. We'll take a look here in a second. So here's account ID, and then we'll drag period. Oops, I don't need fiscal year for this exercise. My bad. We'll do period. And then we'll grab budget amount, and we'll take actual amount. Okay. So I'm still seeing that issue. So I didn't fix it. I might have to go back and fix my join and troubleshoot this further. But again, that's a normal thing that happens when you are working with your data. You just got to make sure that you check and basically validate the information that you have. Okay. So we can close and actually save our module and close that out. And if we go back to our Cognos Analytics company content, you'll see the budget analysis data module is here. And we can actually come in here and now can create a dashboard using that data module, or even create a report as well. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look at how a building report would work. It's really no different than any other package. So this data module now is basically taking the place of our typical packages that we use in our Costpoint reporting. So we just have the budget analysis, our own custom home built, if you will, data module. And let's take a look here and build something a little different. How about a cross tab? We'll do a cross tab, and I want to look by organization, and then by account. I'll drop fiscal year up here. I'll drop period down here. And then I'm going to drag my budget amount as one column, my actual amount next to it. I want to sort these in ascending order. I want to sort my accounts in ascending order. My periods need to be in ascending order. And now I have a cross tab, and we can do a quick page preview. And we'll clean that up just a little bit by removing some of the white space. And now you see here, I have a list of my individual departments. Here's all my accounts, and here's my budget versus actual amount. And now I can do my comparison analysis. And by the way, you can do the calculation to do the variance in your data module too, to even save more work for your end users, or you can actually add a calculation here as well. So I can come in here and add my query calculation, and we'll call that the variance. And in this instance, my variance is going to be budget amount minus actual amount, and click OK. And now you'll see that this should be the difference between these numbers. And actually, I should format these, make it look pretty. And again, you could do all of that in the data module as well. So you don't have to do it in every individual report. But I'll do currency, change that to 0 decimal places, negative sign symbol, parentheses, and click OK. And now you'll see your data in this report with your budget amount, actual amount, and then the variance analysis. And of course, you can do percent calculations and things like that across the board. Okay. And then before we started the webinar, I'm doing a quick time check. We have another 15 minutes or so. So I will go back to assets here, and I'll show you the same report that I just built now, budget versus actual. I actually did this a little bit differently, where now I am looking at the accounts, right? And then the actual amount, budget amount, and variance amount. But this is for all of my divisions in my organization. And I just added the ability here by adding a prompt to my report page. So now I can focus my report by each of my departments as well. So here I'm looking at my consulting group and their numbers. And by the way, I also added subtotals at the end. So you can look at the year-to-date budgeted amount, year-to-date actual amount, and then I could have also added a calculation to that as well. Okay, so you can basically, once you have that piece built, then you're able to slice and dice the information any which way you like. You can build any report that you like. And then a quick example of a Cognos dashboard using the same data. You'll see here that I have a dashboard that now I can interact with in a slightly different way. So I have my actual amount and my budget amount, track it for my whole organization, or I can do it by individual accounts. And you'll see here my year-to-date budget and my year-to-date actual amounts are also updating in real time as I update the data here. And I can look at my whole organization across all accounts. I can look at one organization at a time, or I can look at one account at a time and one individual organization at a time as well. So again, once you do have the underlying data, you can slice and dice, create any visualization. You can use the dashboard. You can use a report, whatever you like. And if I hit edit mode here, you'll see in the sources data, here is my variance analysis data module piece with all of the values that I created for this data module. Okay. All right. So I guess we can have a few minutes for questions. Let me share just some key takeaways with everybody, and then we can turn it over for any questions. So the answer to the question we started off with this afternoon is that you can use external data to integrate it with your Costpoint data. And it's relatively easily, as long as we have some foundational things that we take care of upfront, it's actually almost painless to accomplish this task. You must have a logical/natural relationship, i.e. you have to be able to have the ability to compare apples to apples, especially if you're doing some comparative analysis like variance reporting and things like that. As you saw, my original data module had a couple of defects. I think I missed a step in my join. I would have to check that, but make sure that you're validating and testing, especially if you're building this data module for others to use. You can run totals on your Excel file before you upload it, so you know what the total numbers are. You can run your standard reports against the general ledger, so you know what the numbers are there, and validate for historical data, for example, so that when you are doing your variance analysis, it is accurate. External data can be refreshed. So let's say we did a budget for 2024 and we did our analysis, and now it's 2025. As long as you have the same format of the Excel file, when it's time to refresh that external data, you can just upload a file to replace it. You can also append to a file. So if you have a master file where you're budgeting multiple years of data, you can just append to it, so that, you know, this time around we added 2024 data. Next year we can just add rows to the bottom of that file for 2025, and you can append that file and then tell Cognos that you want to append it. In order to be able to create those required joins and relationships, you will have to do a data module to be able to do the joins and additional data derivations, for example, and calculations and things like that. So you'll definitely need to be able to know how to create data modules as well when you add your external data and integrate it with your Costpoint data. And then, of course, as you saw, the data module can be used as a source for reports and or dashboards, depending on the need. And you can create, obviously, as many different reports as you need, as many different dashboards as you need. Okay. All right. So with that, Don, I'll turn it over to you and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Tafik. Yes, so as Tafik mentioned, now we do have a few minutes for a question and answer session. So if you do have a question, please use that Q&A area at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll take as many questions as we can here in the next few minutes. So we already have a few, Tafik, that have come in, so I'll just run through these.
Sure.
First question, if you want a running total of the actual and budgeted, is it better to do it in the module or the report page?
I think you can do it either way. A lot of the functions like running total that Cognos reporting supports are available inside of a data module. So it just depends on the use case. If you anticipate that you are going to need a running total as part of your analysis, why let the report authors have to do it manually every time they create a report or a dashboard? You can create a calculation in that data, the derived data, to actually use the running total function inside of a data module. There's an expression editor inside of the data module that you could use just like we do in report authoring. So the answer to that question is it just depends on the use case, but it's just as easy to do it in the data module versus the report.
Okay, next question, Tafik. The external data size limitation is 100 megs. Is this a one file size or overall files? Can we add more than one file?
Yeah, so it is that 100 megabyte default is for one size. There is also for one file. There's also a limit for a per user limit as well. And that limit, I think, in Cognos defaults to 500 megabytes. So me as a user can upload as big a file as 100 megabytes, and I can have a total of 500 megabytes of multiple files if I wish to upload that many files. So 100 megabytes in today's world seems very small, but Excel files tend to be compact. And so, 100 megabytes would be a sizable file in the world of Excel. However, having said that, if you are self-hosted or you have access to that, to your Cognos environment directly, those are values that are stored as part of the configuration, and you can change them. You can change the maximum file size, and you can change the maximum number or the volume for overall files per user. One thing I would caution is if you are dealing with files that are bigger than 100 megabytes, you should be considering something like a data warehouse or a custom database or extension tables. This is really not going to perform well when you have such volumes of data, because these Excel files are stored in tables as tables in your content store. So if you have too many of them and they're too big, you could impact performance of your Cognos environment.
All right, next question, Tafik. Is there a comprehensive resource for this version of Cognos? There's books and resources for prior versions. Thank you.
Yeah, so this version of Cognos, I think, should be matching the version that Deltek is releasing or has released for 8.2. And you can find there are PDFs available on the IBM website for the data modules user guide. There's the report authoring user guide. So there are PDFs out there that you could download that have all sorts of information, examples. You might even get samples of demonstrations of all the function calls that are available, and they walk you through the techniques that you need to build data modules and obviously integrate and upload data. So the IBM website is full of information for any of the versions. Obviously, you can Google them. And then I'll let you in a little secret. If you chat GPT some of the stuff, ChatGPT is also very good at finding specific information for you. So the information is out there. I haven't checked lately, but there's a whole slew of documentation also for those of us that bought our licenses from Deltek themselves. If you download CPBI, there's a whole bunch of PDFs there, but they tend to focus more on the out-of-the-box functionality and reports and dashboards that come from the team at Deltek.
All right, next question, Tafiq. Would this method be used to add a complex custom grouping to Costpoint data, or is there an easier way to do that?
You can, the data module and the report will let you do that. If you do it in the data module, then it becomes available to your end users who are using that data module for the reporting, whether they're consuming it or consuming the reports, or they are using it to create reports. But the groupings actually in a data module are very easy to create. It's almost automatic, but you can build them any which way you like. You can build them with case statements. You can build them with if-then logic. You can also have, there is a facility inside of the data modules that actually lets you add a data item to basically create those groupings. So it is doable. I would do it if you want it to be reusable down the line. I would do it in the data module.
Okay, and our final question, Tafiq. Do the modules have data limits? For example, 1 million lines of data, 5 million, etc.
I am not aware of any as far as data limits. I don't know if some of the folks on the call with me today have joined from a couple of customers that I've worked with before, but I do recall they are building a whole slew of data modules with very large volumes of data, and they have actually data modules inside of data modules inside of data modules. So I'm not aware of any limits as far as data modules, and I'm not privy to IBM's future plans. But I think ultimately data modules are going to end up being a replacement for framework manager. So I think the direction is there because of framework manager requirements for it to be a desktop, a Windows application sitting on a desktop. It doesn't lend itself in today's world of hosting and software as a service. So I think ultimately data modules are going to end up replacing framework manager. And you can tell because with every new version of data modules, they've adding more and more functionality, more and more capability.
All right, thank you, Tafiq. That'll conclude the Q&A session. Tafiq, if you wouldn't mind moving to the final slide of the presentation deck, please.
Sure.
Thank you.
One more?
One more, please. Yes. So this will conclude our webinar today. I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their busy day to join us. We hope you found the presentation informational and helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Tafiq or myself, or certainly you could visit us on our website. All that contact information is on your screen. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we will be contacting you in the next day or two with links to download the presentation slides and view the webinar recording. So keep an eye out for that coming in the next couple of days. And again, thank you for joining us. Tafiq, thanks very much for a great presentation. And we look forward to seeing you all on another webinar coming soon. Thanks and have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.